Now it's my pleasure to introduce your presenter today, Michael Chase. Mike is president of Texas International. He is also author of 2 capital equipment strategy books, Equip to Win and Get Your Price. Over his career, he has assembled a track record of improving the growth, competitiveness, and profitability of capital equipment companies. He has broken into new markets, introduced dozens of new products, beaten competitors, participated in the buying and selling of companies, and developed successful organizations. Before forming Texas International in 2006, he held executive positions in general management, marketing, and customer service in large and small capital equipment companies. As a consultant, Mike has worked as a board member, contract executive, advisor, and trainer to complete numerous strategy, corporate development, product management, and marketing projects for his clients. So with that, Mike, welcome.
Thanks, Taylor, and thanks everybody for joining today. Welcome. As Taylor mentioned, today we're going to talk about why you need a value-based strategy. Here's how we're going to go about that. First, I'm going to define value-based strategy, get us all on the same page as to exactly what we're talking about when we say the phrase value-based strategy. Then with that out of the way, I'll then demonstrate for you how a value-based strategy can help you secure more customers at higher prices, help you lower your product costs, help you avoid the commodity trap, and even produce near instant results. Then I'll wrap it up by talking about the returns you can expect from a value-based strategy. I'll talk about those returns in the terms of timing, as well as to magnitude, how much you can expect. So let's jump right in. Let's start with the definition for value-based strategy. Now, this definition is in the context of B2B commerce. So this is businesses selling to other businesses. So with that, a value-based strategy is a business strategy that deliberately creates more economic value for the target customer than alternative offerings. It then extracts fair, profitable compensation for that value. Now, as you can see, I have highlighted some of the key phrases in this definition. I'd like to expand on those a little bit with you right now. Let me start with economic value. Now, I mentioned that this definition for value-based strategy is in the context of B2B commerce, businesses selling to businesses. Well, businesses only make purchases when they expect that making that purchase will help them increase their profitability. It'll improve their economics. So therefore, value must always be expressed in economic terms. Value is always a financial expression. Target customer. The customer defines value. So therefore, the value-based strategy practitioner must have a clear definition of their target customer, know exactly who you are targeting with your value-based strategy. And even more important, you must understand in exquisite detail how your customer profits, makes money by buying products like yours. Alternative offerings. Your value will be measured relative to other offerings in the market, relative to your competitors. Therefore, the value-based strategy practitioner needs to understand those competitors' ability to create value for that same target customer almost as well as you understand your own capability. Fair compensation. This is simply the highest price that you can charge for your added value and still meet your market share objectives. Profitable compensation just means that you have developed products that when sold at fair compensation, meet your profit targets. Now, I left off one of the highlighted words, and it's this word deliberately. A lot of times when you use the phrase value-based strategy, your audience may quickly reduce that sometimes to phrases like value-based selling or value-based pricing. Sure, those are part of a value-based strategy, but they're just that. They're just part of a value-based strategy. You see, a value-based strategy will affect everything that you do to define, create, market, and sell your products. Said another way, value must be created before it can be sold. So a value-based strategy is very deliberate. Maybe an easy way to remember everything that I've said so far is to think about it in terms of this simple infographic. So the main aim of a value-based strategy is to create more economic value for that target customer. That's the blue box in the middle of this slide. That's your added value. The taller the box, the more value. More value than alternative offerings. That's that reference competitor there in the lower left-hand corner. Your goal is to create more value than your customer's next best alternative. Your market value is simply the price the customer's next best alternative is charging for their value, plus your added value. And then your fair compensation is the portion of that market value that you can charge, the highest portion of that market value that you can charge, and still reach your market share goals. So there you have it. There's your definition for value-based strategy. Let's jump into why you need one. We're going to talk about 4 today. We're going to talk about how a value-based strategy can help you secure more customers at higher prices. We're going to talk about how it can lower your product costs, protect you from the commodity trap, and how it has the potential for near instant results. All right, let's talk about the first one. So I'm bringing out that infographic again. And again, emphasize that the whole goal of a value-based strategy is to make that blue box in the middle of this slide as tall as you can. The taller that box, the greater your added value, the greater your market value. And remember, value is in terms of the economic benefit to customers. So the more economic benefit you provide your customers, the more customers are going to be attracted to your offering. That's the more customers part. The higher your added value, the higher your market value, that means your fair compensation is also going to be higher. That's the higher prices part. So value-based strategy produces more customers, higher prices, or some combination of the two. Let me show you how powerful this can be on the profitability of your company. Imagine you're the CEO of a company. Your company's got $800 million in revenue, and you're producing $100 million in profit. Board of directors kind of getting on your case and says, we need to improve. So you call together your senior staff in a meeting with the purpose of figuring out how to improve the profitability of your company. You explain the current situation and you ask for some ideas. Sitting in the front row is your vice president of operations. He raises his hand, says, I have an idea. Why don't we just reduce operating expenses by 10%? The chief accounting officer sitting right next to him takes out his calculator. These guys always have a calculator. And he says, you know what, that's a really good idea. If we reduce operating expenses by 10%, we'll improve profitability by 30%. The engineering VP, he's sitting in the second row, kind of towards the middle. He says, I have another idea. What if we were to reduce product costs by 10%? Chief accounting officer, back on his calculator, says, hey, that's even a better idea. If we can reduce cost of goods sold, product costs by 10%, that would improve profitability by 40%. Chief marketing officer, back of the room to the left, she raises her hand and says, I have what might be an even better idea. What if we were to increase the value we provide our customers by 10% and take that increase in value in price, effectively increasing revenue by 10%? Chief accounting officer punches in the numbers and says, wow, that's a fantastic idea. Increasing the value to our customers and taking that increased value in the form of price would create an 80% change in our profitability. Now, unfortunately, a lot of companies never get to that place. They spend, when they embark on a profitability improvement program, they focus on cost reduction items like the operating expense idea or reducing product costs. The reason they do that is because to execute those types of initiatives only requires you to work on things that you can internally control. Not so for the value-based strategy practitioner. The value-based strategy practitioner is very comfortable understanding their customers in enough detail so they understand exactly how they profit from products like yours. The value-based strategy practitioner is very comfortable analyzing their competitors and understanding exactly how their competitors, what their competitors' capability is to provide value. And therefore, the idea of increasing the value you provide your customers is something that's very executable, comfortable, and it's a good thing because executing on the value-based strategy is going to produce the highest profit. Now that's kind of the go-to reason for adopting a value-based strategy. It's the most intuitive. More value, more customers, higher prices. This next one may not be as intuitive, but a value-based strategy can actually lower product costs. Let me show you how. So what can happen when you don't have a very precise definition of your target customer, and you don't have a very clear understanding of exactly how your customers profit from products like yours? What you'll tend to do is build what I call wide net products. Wide net products are those products that are loaded up with a lot of features and a lot of performance capability, with the idea that if we develop products with lots of features and lots of performance capability, they have a very good chance of capturing customers. Wide nets seem like they would have a very good chance of capturing customers. The problem with the wide net product is that they're over-configured, and this over-configuration means they're going to take a long time to develop. The risk in the development programs is going to be high. The cost to develop those products is going to be high. Once you finally get them developed, they're going to be expensive to manufacture. And because they're loaded up like a Christmas tree full of ornaments, they're not perfect for anybody. Wide net products are going to cost you a lot, and nobody fully values them. Let's try a super simple example to illustrate this point. Let's suppose your customer is a bartender, and you're not bought into this whole value strategy idea, so you're satisfied with that vague definition of your customer as just a bartender. So you set about making a product that for sure will have something in it that a bartender could use. And you might find yourself developing a product like the one on the left. For sure, there's something in there that's useful for the bartender. Sure, there's a bunch of other things, but there's a really good chance that somewhere in there is something that a bartender could use. Now imagine you're a practitioner of value-based strategy, and you know that the first place you want to go, and the place you want to start is with really understanding the customer and how that customer profits from products like yours. And as you go through that process, you would learn that a bartender usually works across a very long bar with lots of customers seated at it. Those customers are buying mostly beer and wine. And the way he makes his money is on tips. And there are two key value drivers for generating tips for the bartender. The first is the number of drinks that he can serve in an hour, so the throughput of drinks. So he needs to serve drinks quickly. And it turns out the tips are also larger when he serves drinks quickly, because those customers are happier. So knowing that about a bartender, you might design a product like the one on the right. It's perfect for the bartender. It does only what he needs, only what's valued. It's lean, so you don't have a lot in there that's going to drive your product costs up, except for those things that drive customer value. Product like the one on the right, you can expect to extract fair value for that. So the way that a value-based strategy reduces your product costs is that understanding of the customer and how they profit from products like yours results in lean products. Okay, this next one also probably is not that obvious that a value-based strategy leads to this idea of avoiding the commodity trap. It's a little bit tricky. Let me spend a little bit more time on this one and explain this to you. Okay, so let's start with this idea of commodity trap. Let me define that for you first. So the commodity trap is that place where your customer sees no difference between you and your competitors except for price. And once that's happened, you have fallen into the commodity trap. Kind of funny thing is that the commodity trap lots of times starts with the hubris of success. So imagine we're at the far left-hand side of this graph on the slide, and you're working for a company and you discover a hard, valuable problem to solve for a customer. It doesn't matter if that hard, valuable problem was discovered in the context of a value-based strategy, by luck, by legacy. It doesn't matter. You found a hard, valuable problem. You figured out what the value drivers were, and you keep working on them. And you're making a lot of money. There's a lot of unmet need initially. So every time you improve the product on those key value drivers, you're increasing the value to the customer, and they keep buying more. At some point in time, a competitor is going to join you. They're seeing you making all this money, targeting this group of customers, and so they jump in and they start working on the exact same value drivers. But what happens over time is that unmet need diminishes and the original customer problem becomes sufficiently solved. No additional features or performance capability is going to add value, help the customer's business. And so even though your products, you and your competitor may have different performance specifications or feature sets, in the customer's mind, there's no difference in your value except for your price. And that's the moment that you've entered the commodity trap. Let me explain with a couple of examples. So on the left here, I have microprocessors. So these are microprocessors that are used for personal computing. Two companies that have spent most, competed in this space the most were Intel and AMD. So if we go all the way back to the early 90s, there was a tremendous unmet need for more processing power on personal computers. I'm sure a lot of you on this webinar can remember staring at the hourglass for minutes on end because your computer was taking so long to move on to whatever the next step was in your workflow. Every time Microsoft introduced a new version of software, it seemed like your old computer just couldn't handle it. You needed more processing speed. So Intel and AMD, for a very long period of time, it lasted till about the early 2000s, were constantly adding real customer value every time they improved the processing power of their microprocessors for personal computers. But then something happened, again, around the early 2000s, maybe mid 2000s, that problem became sufficiently solved. Think about your own experience. You're probably watching this webinar on computers that you own for a long time as compared to the amount of time that you would own a computer back maybe 10 or 15 years ago. Intel and AMD had entered the commodity trap, and both companies have changed their strategy since because they realized that they cannot create new customer value for personal computers by just simply increasing processing speed. And they both have changed their business strategies since then. Another example are the television programming providers like Comcast, Time Warner, DirecTV. So these guys came on the scene back when most people were receiving their television programming over the air, using over the air analog antennas, and they could only get to 2 to 4 major network channels. There's a huge unmet need for more programming. And for a long time, these suppliers would keep adding programming. It would add more value, and we'd pay more for the service, and they competed on that. But that is another problem that is sufficiently solved. There really isn't 300 channels is probably not more valuable than 250 channels to most consumers. It's just more channels. So I think today the television programming distributors actually find themselves in the commodity trap. And I think you might agree with me, they're still struggling to figure out how they're going to get out of it. So let's talk about how a value-based strategy helps you avoid the commodity trap. Well, it turns out that the root cause of the commodity trap is a product-focused strategy that treats the customer problem as static. Value-based strategy works just the opposite. In a value-based strategy, you're always focused on the customer problem. You are always looking for new ways to help your customer become more profitable. And every time that you discover a new way to help your customer become more profitable, and you redefine that market problem, you create for yourself new uncontested space. Let me take the same approach here. Let's go through a few examples about how a value-based strategy can create uncontested space. We've got 3 logos on the screen here. I'm going to start with the one on the upper left-hand corner. The name of the company is Granite Rock. Granite Rock's a quarry. Their product traditionally had been rocks. This was material, gravel and rocks that they would sell to land developers that they would use to prepare a parcel of land for building. Now, Granite Rock, like most quarries, would focus on their product, on their landfill material, and finding ways to produce it more efficiently so they could keep offering their customers lower and lower prices. That was how they were helping their customers' profitability. Well, around the early 1990s, Granite Rock realized that there wasn't much juice left in that orange, that they just weren't going to be able to squeeze much more out of the cost to produce this material, and therefore weren't going to be able to provide much more value to their customers, and they're finding themselves in the commodity trap. In fact, you might argue that gravel and rocks is the epitome of a commodity. But what Granite Rock did was they turned to their customers and tried to understand better how it is exactly their business affects the profitability of their customers. And what they learned was the price of the material, the cost of the material, actually had very little impact on the profitability of a land developer's project. What had a huge impact were the trucks, people, and time spent getting the material from the quarry to the job site. If you go to Granite Rock's website today, it doesn't look like a gravel company. It looks like a logistics company with automatic scheduling. They provide their own materials, but their value proposition is we can get the material to and from your job site more efficiently and lower cost than you can yourselves or any of our competitors. Granite Rock, by focusing on the customer problem, understanding how their customers profit from products like theirs, redefined the market problem and created new uncontested space for themselves. I encourage you to go to their website, click over to their history page, and you'll see this transition in the company happening around the 1990 to 1992 timeframe. The middle logo here, I'm sure you all recognize. This is Amazon. We don't have time on this webinar to talk about all the different ways that Amazon has redefined market problems and created uncontested space for themselves. What I can tell you is that it starts from the top. Jeff Bezos, Amazon's CEO, says this. He says, we first figure out what our customers need, and then we figure out how to be best at that thing. Pretty powerful, right? The opposite of how a lot of companies think. A lot of companies think about the market problem this way. Let's figure out what we're good at, and then let's see if anybody will buy it. It's inside out. Jeff Bezos' approach, we first figure out what our customers need, and then we figure out how to be the best at that, is outside in. Just about the definition of a value-based strategy. And as a result, there are countless ways that you can think of that Amazon has created new uncontested space by redefining market problems. The third logo on the page you probably don't recognize. It's the bottom left-hand corner. The name of the company is Astilleros Armon. Astilleros Armon is a tugboat manufacturer, and they supply tugboats to canals. I'd like to tell you their story. So the Astilleros Armon story starts on the Panama Canal. And just for review, the Panama Canal connects the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean, cutting through the country of Panama. Turns out that the middle of the canal is well above sea level. So at either end of the canal, there are a series of locks. These locks raise ships up to the level of the middle of the canal as you're entering the canal, and then it lowers them back down to sea level as you exit the canal. And here's how the canal operates. So when ships are in the open water of the canal, they are guided by tugboats. These tugboats are necessary because you've got very narrow waterways, you've got very large ships moving at very slow speeds, so they're not very maneuverable. And so to keep them centered in the canal, they require tugboats. And these tugboats, usually there's one on the stern, and then one on the leeward side of the boat, meaning the opposite side of the wind. And these tugboats help keep the boat centered in the canal. Then, as these ships approach the entrance to these locks that raise and lower the ships, they will position the ship perfectly dead center at the entrance of the lock, and then they'll toss a line down to two guys in a rowboat. I kid you not, this is exactly what they do. They drop a line to two guys in a rowboat, and then the two guys in the rowboat row over to the entrance of the lock, and they hand that line over to these little locomotives called mules. Then what the mules do is they take over the job of centering the ship. But instead of centering the ship in the canal, they're taking over the job of centering the ship inside these locks. And then once the ship has been raised or lowered, depending on which direction it's moving, the process reverses itself and the ship is handed off to another set of tugboats on the other side of the lock. Now, this is how the Panama Canal has operated for 100 years. And it turns out there's a big unmet need to find new ways to make this process of moving boats through the locks more efficient. So two key suppliers, Mitsubishi and General Electric, over this 100-year period, invested heavily in making these mules faster, more reliable, more automated, all in the name of improving the efficiency with which ships move through the locks in the Panama Canal. And they were rewarded pretty well for this. In 1914, when the canal first opened, a mule would cost you about $13,000. By the time we get to 2015, they're about $2 million a pop. And there can be as many as 8 mules on the side of a ship. But then in 2016, a new set of locks opened on the Panama Canal. And the Panama Canal Authority made this investment for the purpose of improving the amount of ships, increasing the number of ships that could move through the canal, as well as increasing the size of ship that could move through the canal. So they opened this new set of locks. They sit parallel to the old set of locks everywhere along the canal. Now, if I zoom in to these new locks, you'll notice something. The mules are gone. So if you look at that picture there on the left, you see that the tugboat, instead of handing the ship over to a set of mules to manage the ship inside the lock, the tugboat comes right in the lock with the ship. This is Astilleros Armon's idea. What Astilleros Armon did was they went to the Panama Canal Authority and says, hey, I think we have a way that we can improve the efficiency of the way we move ships through the entire canal. And by having tugboats come into the locks with the ships and then leave with that same ship, we can decrease the amount of time it takes to move through the canal, and we can reduce your capital costs in both tugboats and in terms of the mules. What Astilleros Armon did was they created new uncontested space by redefining the market problem. And in doing so, not only had Mitsubishi and GE found themselves in the commodity trap, but they actually obsoleted their entire product line. So value-based strategy can help you avoid the commodity trap. Okay, this may be the one you've been waiting for. How can a value-based strategy produce near instant results? Okay, if you remember at the beginning of this webinar, we talked about how deliberate a value-based strategy was and how it affects everything you do to define, create, market, and sell your products. Well, there it is right there, that second step, create value. This is the step where you take your understanding of customers and competitors and develop products that will produce more economic value than those competitors. And this is the part that can take so long, right? It's driven by whatever your development cycle time is. This is the part that frustrates the need results now crowd. I say don't despair. You see, even if you're not operating in a value-based strategy framework, you are every single day, probably just before you get on this webinar, and it's probably what you're going to do right when you log off, you're engaging customers, you're battling competitors, you're taking orders. So your strategy is well informed. You are in constant contact with your market. So your strategy is well informed, even if it's not guided by value-based framework. What that means is your existing portfolio may contain untapped value. So here's what you do. You still need to go through that defined value step. So the defined value step is where you define that target customer, where you develop that understanding of how they profit from products like yours, and you understand your competitor's ability to create value for that same customer. Now, once you've done that, once you understand your added value for each of the products in your portfolio as compared to reference competitors, You can then figure out what your market value is for each of those products in your portfolio. And then with an understanding of market value, you can then take a look at the price that you've been charging for those products. And when you do that, you're going to get one of three outcomes. First outcome, you priced it correctly. Move on. Nice job. You've actually, even without a value-based strategy framework, you've landed on a value-based price, fair compensation. You may find that you've been expecting a price higher than a product's actual market value. All this does for you is explain why you've been feeling so much stress about a product. It'll explain it for you. It's this third outcome that can produce the instant results, is you discover that you have underpriced a product, and that's found gold. When you discover that underpriced product, you get to take a shortcut. You go right from defined value to market value. Market value is that step where you develop the ability to substantiate your value during a sales cycle. Now, the truth is we're really not skipping the create value step. You've already created the value. By going through the define value step, it just helped you develop an understanding of exactly how much value you created and how to charge for it. So when you get to that market value step, what you're going to do is you're going to adjust the price to reflect fair compensation. You're going to update all of your marketing content so that you can substantiate that value. And then you're going to train the sales force to defend value-based pricing. One more hint on instant results. It's where to look. Lots of times, the motivation for learning about and adopting a value-based strategies is a problem product in the portfolio. So these are the products that management's not happy with pricing or profitability or market share. Customers are always pushing back on pricing. The sales guys are always under stress because the management's looking for prices. They're not sure how they're going to extract from customers. Well, in these situations, pricing tension is high. And when pricing tension is high, there is a very good chance that the market is already telling you what value-based pricing is. The place you're going to find these underpriced products is actually in your top performers. These are the products where management's happy with pricing, market share is great, and customers are not complaining about price. Price tension's low. This is where you should look. This is where you're likely to find those underpriced products that have the potential to be repriced and produce instant results for you. So look to your top performers. Okay, I promised you that I would wrap this up with a discussion about what kind of returns you can expect from a value-based strategy. Let me talk about those first in terms of timing. So I've got here is a timeline. So I've broken this up into three key segments. I've got less than 3 months, 3 months to about a year, and then greater than 1 year. So in those first 3 months, this is the first thing you're going to do is you're going to develop a critical mass of understanding about value-based strategy, its tools and approaches in your company. And the moment you've done that, now you're equipped to go through that defined value step. And now, the very first place you're going to start to see returns is when you fix these underpriced products, like we talked about a few slides ago. That same exercise can also be applied to the rest of the portfolio. That understanding, that definition of value is going to help you improve your ability to substantiate value for the entire portfolio, which will lead to some incremental improvements in price and market share or win rate in those products. And that can happen inside the first 3 months. Because all this takes is just understanding how to define value for all the products in your portfolio. In the 3 to 12 month time frame, this is about where you can start seeing results from leaning out products. So you're using this definition, this very clear definition of your target customer and how they profit from products like yours, to start to lean out existing products, stripping them of things that customers don't value. So what drives the timeline for this is just some of these items may just be manufacturing configurable items, and you can do them really quickly. Some may require a little bit of engineering, and that can take a little bit more time. Then it's in this 1 year and beyond time frame that you start to see the returns on new products that have been developed in this value-based strategy framework. Usually the first ones that come out will be new versions of existing products. So you got a much clearer idea of exactly what's driving value and how to turn those knobs in a way that your competitors can't keep up. And that will happen somewhere in the one plus year time frame. So creating higher value versions of existing products. And probably the last thing that will happen is you develop such an intimate understanding of your customer's business that you discover ways to create new uncontested space. All right, so that's the time. That's the Gantt chart, if you will, of value-based strategy returns. Let me use a case study to give you an idea of the magnitude of returns that you can expect. So this is a heavily sanitized case study from one of my clients. We'll call them an $800 million equipment maker. And what they did on their journey to implement a value-based strategy is they first, as you might guess, they corrected the pricing on an underpriced product. They stripped that same product of its non-value-added features. They then developed a more valuable version of that product and ultimately created some new uncontested space. And here's how that laid out in terms of the returns that this company got. So as I said, they started off as an $800 million company, generating, at this time they were generating about $200 million in operating profit. In that first year, they fixed the underpriced product. That increased revenue, which improved operating profit. So increased revenue by 10%. That resulted in 30% improvement in their operating profit. By year 2, that product has been leaned out. It's been stripped of its non-value-added features and performance capability. That resulted in a lower cost of goods sold, again improving operating profit. By year 3, they've introduced a new version of that product based on their understanding of how their customer values and generates profit off of products like theirs. That increased revenue from 880 million to over $1 billion, again increasing operating profit. And then by year 4, we start to see revenue from some new uncontested space. Initially, this is slow as customers start adopting this new solution that they brought to the market. But by year 5, it is a substantial portion of their business. All right, let me wrap this up for you guys. Here's why you need a value-based strategy. It's going to help you secure more customers at higher prices. It's going to help you lower your product costs. It's going to provide some protection from the commodity trap. It has potential for near instant results. And all of this adds up to an opportunity to more than triple your profit. Thanks. Taylor, I'll turn it back to you.
Great, thanks, Mike. Those were some great insights. And we've had a few questions come in so far during the webinar, but there's still time to enter your question into the panel on your screen. While you're entering, a reminder to complete that 10-second survey while exiting today's webinar to receive a copy of How to Put a Value Tag on Your Product and be entered into a raffle giving away 1 free copy of Mike's book, Get Your Price. Now to give you a couple more minutes to enter your questions, just a few words on leverage point. So Mike did a great job proving the point that you need a value-based strategy. But how can and why should you take that strategy to your sales team? Well, Forrester research states that the first vendor to succeed in communicating a vision of value to executives wins the business 74% of the time. So how can you guarantee that you'll be that vendor? Well, your sales team needs to bring their approach into the 21st century, meaning it must be value-focused, customer-centric, and digital. The traditional sales approach was created to educate a buyer, but today's buyers are more educated than ever, spending more than 60% of their buying process researching online before even talking to a rep. So do away with the standard corporate overview, long PowerPoint presentation, extensive questioning, and features and benefits review. Instead, create a crisp digital presentation that highlights what you're actually going to deliver to that customer, qualitatively, quantitatively, and financially. Present data that can be revised so the prospect can visualize financial results, and leave behind a unique presentation that is tailored to them. Sounds all great, right? Sure does, but I'm guessing you're wondering about where to actually start. Well, that answers case studies. Old school sales and marketing reps have generated an amazing amount of content that our buyers actually want to read, but it's static and it frequently gets lost in the shuffle. Case studies are a prime example. They very clearly give you a crisp background and challenge, spice it up with a quote, and then get straight into solutions and financial results. Buyers download them from your site, ask for them after a sales call, and make buying decisions based off the financial results that are displayed. So why are salespeople only using them as a leave behind? Let's pause right there. Leave behind. Why are you leaving behind something that gets to the point fast and proves your value and convinces a buyer to buy? Well, maybe it's because it's not digital. Well, now they can be. Embedding this information into your sales presentation is the only way to be the first vendor to communicate a vision to value. And remember, according to Forrester, that vendor wins the business 74% of the time. So I took some screenshots from our interactive sales presentation tool to give you an example. This is a digital presentation. Everything you see can be customized live for the prospect. This is a fictional example where we embedded an existing static case study into the presentation. To start, we frame the customer's challenge. After providing industry insights, we jump into the solutions that were provided to a similar customer within that case study. Business productivity improvements, risk mitigation, IT infrastructure cost savings, and IT staff productivity benefits. This allows you to have a collaborative conversation with the prospect that's on the line. From there, we get straight into the financial results, quantifying the value that was delivered from each solution. Again, all of this is customizable. Although the information came from a case study for a customer similar to the prospect on the line, you may find that that prospect wants to change a few numbers to better match their company. Well, it's all possible. With a digital presentation, you can go right in there and recalculate the total value delivered and create a presentation that's completely unique to that prospect on the line. So if you found any of this interesting, we'd love to have you enter into a raffle we're doing where you can digitally transform one of your case studies free of charge. So just check that box in the corresponding survey and that'll pop up leaving today's webinar, or you can also email us at casestudies@leveragepoint.com. Okay, so that's it from us. Let's jump into Q&A. So we've had some great questions so far, and always the most popular, I will answer myself. Yes, this webinar is recorded, and the slides and recording will be emailed to you within 2 business days. Okay, so Mike, if you're ready, we will get started.
I'm ready.
All right, first question. What kind of products and what kind of teams should you start this value-based strategy?
Terrific question. So anytime you're embarking on a value-based strategy, the first step is to develop a critical mass of understanding amongst in a business. So this would be in the key players in implementing the value-based strategy. So this would be marketing leaders, product managers, P&L owners, and sales leadership. And that's to get a common understanding of the framework so that everybody's working from a common baseline and a common language. Then the second step is to take that understanding and do what we talked about in about the middle of the webinar, and is apply it to the existing portfolio and do a value audit and see if you've got some of these underpriced products so that you can develop some instant results. And there's 2 reasons that that's important. One, it's going to help your company out and improve your profitability right away. It'll also create some enthusiasm for how this can be applied to your company, and it'll get the momentum going. Once you've done that, now the question becomes, now what do I do? Right? When I go and where do I focus? My recommendation is that you start applying value-based strategy to whatever your company's whatever products in your company are most important to your company's growth and profitability going forward. And it doesn't have to be a product that's just being defined or one that isn't released yet. Apply it to that most important products. So do the Pareto of most important products and start at the top of that Pareto and apply value-based strategy to that product, no matter where that product is in its life cycle.
Great, thanks. And next question. So based off of your experience, what are the barriers to a value strategy adoption?
Another good one. So probably the biggest obstacle to successful adoption or implementation of a value-based strategy is a failure to get close enough to your customer and define that customer clear enough, understand that how that customer profits from products like yours, and a failure to understand the competitor's capability to develop value for that customer. This type of work is core to a product manager's job. They're the only person in the company typically that's focused on this. And when you fail to do this, sometimes you end up taking shortcuts. You develop value models, value-based pricing, and value propositions that aren't resonating with customers because you haven't done the work to really get that customer defined well, really understand that customer's business and understand how you're creating value. So the two barriers are not getting close enough to your customers and not understanding your relative value as it compares to your competitors.
Great. All right, and next question for you. How do you get those product managers focused on value?
I love this one. So this is tough. Product managers are the go-to folks inside of a company for product specs, latest data on the product to save that sale that we need to get in this quarter. So these are like MVPs running around the company, and they can get stuck on the sales support treadmill. And so what's important, so getting product managers focused on things like the effort it takes to implement a value-based strategy is to figure out what it is that is keeping you on this sales support treadmill. And actually, what you usually find is because some part of the marketing infrastructure hasn't been built, some of the marketing work hasn't been done. So what I've done, and I'll talk about this in terms of two different roles. When I was running marketing organizations, I would, to establish accountability for making progress on these things that are important but not necessarily urgent, is at the start of every quarter, I would have my product management team commit to some kind of improvement that would help them get off the sales support treadmill. It might be improving a piece of marketing content, it might be doing a better job of training the sales force, it might be doing a better job of defining a product that's about to go into development. And then we would track that at a marketing staff meeting all through the quarter and measure our results at the end of the quarter and then make a new set of commitments. In my consulting life, we do a similar thing. So I coach a lot of product managers and we meet on a regular basis. And a big part of my job, in addition to helping them with the mechanics of implementing a value-based strategy, I also act as an accountability point. So every 2 weeks, they get on the phone with me and we've got to talk about how we're going to make progress on the value-based strategy. So the summary of that is the key to getting product managers focused is figure out some way in your organization to establish accountability points, inspection points on these things that are important to help you secure more customers at higher prices, but not necessarily urgent. So either use some control point in a staff meeting, get some outside help, but create some accountability for these things that are important, but not necessarily urgent.
Great. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, next one for you. How do you show value when responding to RFPs that ask large number of questions with minimal options to provide unique information?
So the first step in showing value is understanding value. So if I get a request for proposal from a customer that I don't know very well, I would find a way to get close to that customer to understand their buying decision, their value drivers in their buying decision, so that I would then understand how to express value. The mistake would be to take a off-the-shelf value proposition that has not been validated with that customer or customer type, because you're not sure. Remember I said at the beginning, the customer defines value. First step is understanding how that customer defines value.
Great, and it looks like this is the last question we have for you, so here we go. What point should sales get involved? So sales is critical. I could take this question a lot of different directions. Let's talk about it from here. So product managers' role in, let's say from the market value forward part of this process, is developing what I call master value proposition for a group of customers. The salesperson then, when they first engage with a customer, what they should be thinking about is how do I tailor that master value proposition to meet this customer's specific needs. No product manager is going to understand that next level of detail in the value proposition from the position of product manager. That's what a salesperson does. So a salesperson gets involved as soon as a prospect enters the funnel, and their first job is to understand and qualify that customer and understand exactly how value can be created for that customer, and then
depending on the type of product and how marketing and sales work together in a particular organization, start tailoring that master value proposition to match that customer's definition of value.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. So it looks like that's all we have for you guys today. Just a quick reminder. So a quick reminder before you go to register for next month's webinar during that exit survey. Mike Wilkinson will be joining us again to discuss his most recent report on the 7 big mistakes many businesses make when selling on value. That will be February 22nd at 11 a.m. as well. All right, so that's it from us for today. Thank you all for taking the time to join us, and a special thank you to Mike for your insights. And from all of us here at Leverage Point, we hope you have a great rest of your week. Take care.